What happens when horror stops looking toward the future and starts digging into folklore, trauma, body modification, and death itself? Because today's horror stories are getting deeply personal. What's good, fam? Welcome back to The Final Cut, your daily pulse in horror, covering the biggest stories in horror films, psychological thrillers, festival buzz, indie horror, streaming, and the dark corners of genre culture from around the world. I'm Travis, and today we're talking a former coroner making a Colorado shot horror thriller, John Boyega diving into Scandinavian supernatural terror, and a disturbing new transhumanist thriller exploring body horror and obsession. Let's get into it. One of today's most unexpected horror stories isn't coming out of Hollywood. It's coming out of Colorado Springs. Former El Paso County coroner Leon Kelly, yes, an actual former coroner, is producing his first feature film titled Devil in the Trunk. And honestly, that background alone already gives this project a completely different kind of energy. Kelly served as a coroner from 2018 through 2024 and led the office through some incredibly heavy real-world investigations, including COVID era fatalities and the horrifying return to nature funeral home case involving nearly 200 decomposing bodies. That is a horror movie right there. But after years surrounded by death and trauma, Kelly and fellow forensic pathologist Dan Lingenfelter turned toward horror as a creative outlet. That eventually evolved into the 6 Feet Under Horror Fest, which has now grown into a full-on grassroots horror community featuring screenings, Q&As, and local filmmaking. Now, they're making the jump into feature filmmaking with Devil in the Trunk, described as a throwback 70s car chase Western thriller. Not straight horror, elevated horror. Not prestigious horror, but a grimy, regional, practical feeling thriller built in Colorado with local talent and local locations. Honestly, horror always can use that. More regional filmmaking, more weird independent voices, more people outside the studio system telling stories rooted in their communities. Production is currently happening across the Front Range through June 10th, with a crowdfunding campaign launching next month to finish editing and effects work. And the producers are hoping for a Colorado Springs premiere before taking the film to festivals later this year. So, my question for you guys, do you think regional indie horror is where some of the genre's most authentic storytelling is happening right now? Let me know your answers in the comments ahead.
Streaming had nothing worth watching. Then GRUV showed up. New Blu-rays, new steelbooks. Physical media I actually own. Link in bio.
Early this morning, Deadline dropped. John Boyega is stepping deeper into horror. And based on the first images from The Punishing, this thing looks cold, isolated, and deeply unsettling. The supernatural thriller comes from writer-director Chris Sparling, the mind behind Buried, and stars Boyega alongside Cara Delevingne. Sorry. I actually practiced that earlier. Set on a remote Icelandic island, the story follows a man who mysteriously recovers from a terminal illness after arriving on the island with his wife. But the healing comes with consequences. Dark consequences. The film reportedly leans heavily into Scandinavian folklore, psychological dread, bodily transformation, and slow-burning supernatural horror. And visually, the early images are bleak. Cold coastlines, isolation, hella fog, rocky landscapes, the kind of environments where horror feels ancient. This doesn't look like fast-paced studio horror. This feels closer to atmospheric folk horror mixed with emotional decay and paranoia. Honestly, Iceland continues feeling like one of the most underutilized settings in modern horror cinema. The environment itself already feels haunted before anything supernatural even appears. The film is currently in post-production and launching international sales at Cannes this week. So, my question for you guys, would you rather see horror return to slow burn atmospheric storytelling or stay focused on fast-paced chaos and gore? And what's up with that Attack of the Block 2, John? Holler at us, fam. But let me know your answers in the comments ahead.
Finished my last horror game. Nothing left to play. Then I found Fanatical. Insane deals on games every day. Link in bio.
And last but definitely not least, one of the most fascinating genre projects coming out of Cannes right now might be Increase. The futuristic psychological thriller stars Matilda Lutz, Suzanne Clement, Holt McCallany, and Fernanda Urola. And the premise feels like Black Swan colliding with Cronenberg body horror. The story follows Jeannie, a professional runner whose life changes after a catastrophic accident leaves her without both legs. But after receiving advanced prosthetics connected directly to her brain, she not only recovers, she evolves beyond normal human capabilities. And that's where things start to get dangerous. The film explores transhumanism, obsession, identity, and the terrifying idea of removing human limitations entirely. Director Nicholas Berry says the film was inspired by modern anxieties surrounding technology, AI, digital dependence, and humanity's obsession with optimization and Oscar Pistorius. Sorry, I had to put that. I'm sorry, I had to put that in there. And honestly, that's one of the biggest horror themes quietly emerging right now. Not monsters, except for Pistorius, not ghosts, not killers, but the fear of humanity trying to improve itself beyond recognition. The project reportedly pulls influence from Gattaca, Black Swan, and David Cronenberg's body horror films, which is a pretty wild combination. And visually, the film plans to contrast cold, sterile present-day sequences with emotional flashbacks from Jeannie's childhood. That emotional split can make this one hit really hard psychologically, because the question underneath all of this is simple. At what point does improving yourself stop making you human? And that's terrifying. So, my question for you guys, would you ever willingly replace parts of your body with advanced technology if it made you physically superior? Let me know your answers in the comments ahead. Today's take: one thing's becoming very clear in 2026 horror. The genre is becoming deeply obsessed with transformation, mental transformation, physical transformation, spiritual transformation. Whether it's folklore, AI, body horror, grief, obsession, or identity, horror keeps asking the same question. What happens after people change into something they no longer recognize? And honestly, that's probably why the genre feels stronger than it has in years, because the fears are becoming more personal again. With today's Spotify poll question, which horror theme is hitting hardest right now? Folk horror had a whole bunch of that last week. Psychological horror, body horror, tech horror. Vote now on Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of The Final Cut. Follow us everywhere at HMUNCUT. Me personally at Travis Knight Quill with an extra L at the end. And if you got breaking horror news, trailers, indie projects, or festival tips, DM us directly. You might end up featured on a future episode. That's it for today's episode of The Final Cut, your daily post in horror. Stay sharp, stay weird. We'll be back tomorrow. More headlines, more updates, more news from the globe. Until then, you guys know the drill. Keep the lights on.
Want real horror coverage? Horror Movies Uncut. Smartest reviews, best interviews, no fluff. HMUncut.com.